The courtroom is already buzzing before anything is said. A low murmur hangs in the air, the kind that signals something is about to break. Phones are half raised, enough to capture a moment no one wants to miss. Judge Caprio is mid-sentence, calm and measured, explaining procedure like he has done countless times. Then the teen leans back, smirks, and cuts through the room with a single line. "I don't follow rules." The words land heavy. A gasp ripples across the benches. For a brief second, it feels less like a courtroom and more like a cultural collision. Old values meeting new defiance head-on. This is not disrespect. It sounds like a declaration. Judge Caprio stops speaking. He does not react. He does not raise an eyebrow. He simply looks up. The silence stretches. Seconds pass. In that quiet, everyone understands what happened. Authority has been tested, not loudly, but publicly. The teen seems amused by the pause, mistaking restraint for weakness. He doesn't realize that silence, in this room, carries more power than shouting ever could. Across the gallery, heads turn. The air tightens. Somewhere between arrogance and ignorance, a line has been crossed. And while the teen thinks he has made a statement, he has actually opened a door. Because what he didn't realize was, this was no longer just a courtroom moment. It was the beginning of a lesson the entire country would soon be talking about very soon. Outside that quiet courtroom, the world is shifting. Rules once sacred now compete with algorithms. Authority is measured not by wisdom, but by views. A clip like this, a teen defying a judge, is exactly the kind of moment that thrives online. It's rebellion packaged for entertainment, disrespect dressed up as courage, and that's what makes this so much bigger than a traffic ticket. Judge Frank Caprio isn't just another official enforcing fines. For decades, he's been the face of compassionate justice, a man who listens before he punishes, who believes that dignity must guide discipline. His courtroom has been a symbol of civility in an age of chaos. But now, even that civility is being challenged by a generation raised on the idea that attention equals power. The stakes are no longer legal. They're cultural. The teen sitting across from him isn't simply a rule breaker. He represents an attitude that many fear is spreading, a world where the loudest voice wins. Humility is mistaken for weakness. For the audience, the tension is immediate. Part of them feels the outrage. How dare anyone speak that way to a judge? But another part wonders, what made him so fearless or foolish? Is this defiance or desperation to be seen? The clash becomes something deeper. Respect versus relevance. Tradition versus performance. In that single defiant moment, a mirror was held up to the times. And what it reflected wasn't just arrogance, but confusion. A generation unsure if rules are meant to guide them or hold them back. Judge Caprio sits still, sensing all of this. To him, this isn't just a young man's rebellion. It's a test of patience, of principle, of how far kindness can reach before it's mistaken for surrender, and to understand how this confrontation reached this boiling point. You need to know exactly who this teen thought he was before that day in court. The teen's story had already been written online, a carefully curated highlight reel of defiance. His social media feed was a collection of smirks and slogans. Don't tell me what to do. Rules are for followers. He wasn't a criminal. Just a kid who'd learned that being loud was a shortcut to attention. Every prank, every confrontation, every act of rebellion had a purpose to go viral. To be noticed, to feel powerful in a world where validation came in likes and shares. His friends called him fearless. Teachers called him disrespectful. But to him, those were the same thing. The internet had rewarded his attitude for years. A clip of him arguing with a security guard had hit 10,000 views. Another of him mocking a teacher made it onto a meme page. Each laugh, each repost, chipped away at his ability to see boundaries as real. If everyone applauded his defiance, why stop now? He wasn't evil. He was addicted not to crime, but to attention. His parents tried lectures, but he heard only noise. They'd grounded him once. He'd filmed the argument and posted it. Comments rolled in calling him brave. It was enough. In his mind, he'd won. And so when he got the traffic citation, he didn't see it as a consequence. It was content. Another chance to perform. He came to court dressed like he was going to a live stream, not a hearing. A camera-ready grin, an inflated sense of control. And a script rehearsed in his head. Stay cool, stay funny, stay above it all. When the judge entered, he barely looked up. The authority that used to command respect now looked to him like just another stage. Every word out of his mouth was part of a performance. Even his apology, half-hearted, practiced, carried the rhythm of someone who thinks charm is a shield. The contradictions were everywhere. He spoke of independence, but blamed the system for his mistakes. He demanded understanding, but mocked anyone who gave it. He wanted to be taken seriously, yet refused to take anything seriously himself. Arrogance wasn't his nature. It was armor, a way to hide uncertainty beneath swagger. To the spectators, it was frustrating. To Judge Caprio, it was familiar. He'd seen this kind of confidence before, brittle, loud, desperate to be heard but terrified of being understood. The teen thought he was in control, unaware that his every word was revealing the weakness. He worked so hard to hide, but arrogance has a way of collapsing when it meets. Someone who doesn't need to raise their voice to hold. Powered. Frank Caprio did not arrive in this courtroom by accident. Long before the cameras, before the viral clips and headlines, he was a son of immigrants who learned early that respect was survival. His parents worked tirelessly, not for applause, but for stability, teaching him that rules were not chains, but guardrails. In their small kitchen, justice was not abstract. It was fairness at the dinner table, honesty in struggle, and dignity even when no one was watching. Those lessons would quietly shape every decision he made for the rest of his life, long before fame arrived on television screens. Years later, when Frank Caprio put on a robe, he did not see power. He saw responsibility. Decade after decade, he listened to stories no one else had time for. Single parents, immigrants, young people making reckless mistakes. He learned that punishment alone rarely corrected behavior, but understanding often did. He built a reputation not by being lenient, but by being human. In a system built on speed, he chose patience. In a culture that rewards volume, he mastered restraint and calm presence. Caprio understood something many never do. Authority does not come from volume or fear. It comes from consistency. From showing up every day and treating people like they matter, even when they've done something wrong. He had seen defiance before, hundreds of times, in different accents, ages, and attitudes. What never changed was the root. Most arrogance masked insecurity. Most bravado hid confusion. And most young people pushing limits were really searching for boundaries they could trust, unlike the teen before him. Caprio never needed to perform. His confidence was quiet, earned through years of listening instead of speaking. He knew when to pause. He knew when silence could teach more than lectures. And he knew that humiliation hardens hearts, while dignity has the power to disarm. Every calm response was intentional. Every measured word was chosen with care, not for the audience, but for the person standing in front of him. To spectators, it might look effortless. But this composure was built through decades of restraint, through moments when anger would have been easier. Caprio had learned that true strength is refusing to be pulled into chaos. Where others escalate, he absorbs. Where others react, he reflects. And in doing so, he holds the moral ground without ever announcing it. That quiet authority is what makes his courtroom different, his presence unforgettable. As the teen continued posturing, Caprio remained still, already understanding how this would end. He had seen this story play out too many times to be surprised. Because when the debate finally ignites, only one of them is truly prepared. The courtroom feels smaller now, as if the walls themselves are closing in. The teen slouches in his chair, half smiling, confident that this is just another performance. He speaks quickly, over the judge, over the hum of the audience, over anyone who might remind him that this isn't a game. "Look, it's not that serious," he says, waving a hand dismissively. "You guys take this stuff way too far. It's just rules. Rules change. Judge Caprio listens without interruption. His eyes stay fixed on the teen. Not harsh, not indulgent, just observant. Each word the teen throws feels smaller against that calm silence. The audience shifts uncomfortably. A few shake their heads. The bailiff stands a little taller. The teen mistakes their unease for attention. He leans forward, louder now. Everyone breaks the rules sometimes, he insists. I'm just honest about it, he smirks, trying to reclaim control. You can't expect people to follow every stupid law. That's not how the world works anymore. Still no response. Judge Caprio folds his hands, glances down at the papers in front of him, then back at the boy. His restraint feels heavier than any scolding could. The silence stretches again, pressing into the teen's confidence. For the first time, there's a flicker of uncertainty behind his grin. Are you finished? The judge asks finally, voice low but steady. The question hangs like a weight. The room goes still. No one dares move. The teen exhales, trying to keep his composure, but the rhythm is gone. Every ounce of swagger begins to sound rehearsed. The performance is cracking. What he doesn't realize is that this stillness, this quiet tension is not weakness. It's precision. Judge Caprio isn't ignoring him. He's letting him run out of rope. Every interruption, every careless word, becomes its own evidence. The air feels electric now, heavy with something unseen. Everyone can sense the balance shifting, though no one can predict how. And then without warning, the judge leans forward. Judge Caprio leans forward, his gaze steady, calm, almost gentle. The teen's smirk falters for a fraction of a second, but he recovers quickly, thinking at a pause, a lull he can exploit. He doesn't yet see that the room has changed. The audience feels it. The air tightens. Silence begins to press down in a way that is heavier than any shout could have been. Let's step back for a moment, Judge Caprio begins, his voice even, deliberate. You said you don't follow rules. That's true, isn't it? He doesn't wait for an answer. He lets the question hang, a quiet weight in the room. You feel free because rules feel restrictive. You think rules are chains, limitations meant to hold you down? But what rules really do, what they have always done, is protect freedom. The teen blinks, unsure. The pause stretches. Caprio's calm is disarming. He continues, they protect the weak from the strong, the unaware from the careless. They allow communities to exist without chaos. Without rules, what you call freedom becomes anarchy. You call yourself independent, but independence without boundaries is nothing but recklessness. The courtroom is silent. Even the whispers of the spectators have died down. Caprio's words are not loud, but each lands with precision, like pebbles dropped into water rippling outward. The teen shifts in his seat, attempting a smile, trying to regain footing. But the cracks are showing. Now, the judge goes on. Let me ask you this. What is real freedom? Is it doing whatever you want, whenever you want? Or is it knowing you have a responsibility to those around you, understanding that choices have consequences? That is freedom. Not defiance. Not arrogance. Responsibility. That is what your ancestors understood when they built this country. That is what every community relies upon. That is what you are being taught, whether you recognize it or not. The teen's confidence wavers. His words slow when he tries to speak. He opens his mouth, closes it, searching for an escape hatch that isn't there. The room feels suffocating, not from anger, but from clarity. The audience leans forward, collectively holding their breath. Judge Caprio pauses, letting the moment sink in. Each second stretches longer than the last. Then, softly, almost conversationally, he adds, arrogance is loud because it is insecure. True confidence doesn't shout. It listens. It observes. It understands. The teen's smirk disappears completely. His usual posturing fails him now. He tries to retort, but the words falter, unconvincing even to him. Every interruption, every dismissive gesture that once signaled bravado now reads as uncertainty. Every nod from the audience, every quiet intake of breath reinforces the shift. Caprio doesn't need to raise his voice. His restraint, the control of his presence, has done the work for him. The courtroom has become a theater of reflection. Spectators aren't just watching. They are participating, absorbing the lesson, feeling the weight of truth in a way that loud confrontation could never teach. He leans back slightly, letting the teen's silence speak. "You think freedom is escaping rules?" Caprio says. "I'm here to show you that freedom is choosing to respect them. That is power. That is dignity. That is strength. Not defiance. Not disruption. Not arrogance. You may not feel it now, but one day will understand that every rule you ignored was not an obstacle, it was a guidepost." The teen's eyes widen, the realization hitting unevenly, jaggedly. He had walked in with certainty, convinced the world would bend to his bravado. Now he is faced with something he cannot perform around, something he cannot fake. A calm, steady force, rooted in principle, patience, and humanity. The room shifts subtly, the air vibrating with quiet revelation. The audience's faces reflect astonishment, awe, the kind of emotional release that comes from watching a moral truth unfold in real time. Caprio doesn't rush. He waits, knowing the lesson needs to land organically. Every second of silence, every subtle glance, every pause between sentences magnifies the weight of his words. He doesn't humiliate. He teaches. He doesn't shame. He illuminates. Finally, almost imperceptibly, he leans forward again, voice measured but firm, and delivers the line that reframes everything. Respect is not weakness. Listening is not surrender. True strength is measured by what you protect, not what you break. Remember that. The teen sits frozen, unprepared for the force of subtlety. Confidence has crumbled into quiet reckoning. The room exhales collectively, absorbing the full emotional impact. Spectators glance at one another, phones poised. Knowing they've witnessed more than a citation being adjudicated, they've watched a fundamental lesson delivered in its purest form. The moment stretches. A quiet crescendo of revelation as the audience digests what just happened. The teen, once a picture of unshakable arrogance, now seems small, his performance undone not by ridicule, but by clarity, principle, and patience. But the shock didn't end in the courtroom, it exploded online. Within hours, the clip was everywhere. Phones buzzed with notifications. Social media feeds erupted as videos of the courtroom exchange were shared, reshared, and dissected. The teen's defiance, the judge's calm, every pause and glance, became a series of snapshots and short clips, each framed to emphasize the dramatic contrast. Hashtags started trending. Hashtag rules matter. Hashtag Judge Caprio. Hashtag respect and responsibility. Comments poured in by the thousands, a cacophony of outrage, admiration, and debate. Some viewers cheered the teen, calling him brave, fearless, a symbol of a generation refusing to be confined. Others condemned him, insisting he had shown the very arrogance and entitlement they feared had infected youth culture. Between the extremes were thoughtful threads, people wrestling with what they had just witnessed, asking themselves, when does freedom become irresponsibility? When does defiance stop being courage? The story spread beyond the courtroom. News outlets picked it up, blending analysis with viral content. Late-night hosts dissected the moment on air. Influencers recreated the lines, splicing clips with dramatic captions. The conversation spilled into classrooms, dinner tables, offices, and online forums. It became a touchstone for discussions on respect, authority, and the generational divide. Viewers began to see the incident as symbolic. This was no longer about a traffic citation or a single teen's arrogance. It became a lens to examine society's values, tension between instant gratification and long-term responsibility, and the importance of role models who embody restraint, dignity, and moral clarity. People across the country felt invested in the outcome, not just because it was compelling, but because it reflected challenges they faced in their own lives, communities, and families. On social media, the impact was immediate. Memes circulated highlighting the teen's smirk alongside Caprio's calm demeanor. Comment sections lit up with debates, some heated, some reflective. Users tagged friends, quoting lines that resonated, emphasizing the contrast between loud rebellion and quiet authority. The courtroom moment became a shared experience, uniting viewers in discussion, disagreement, and admiration. Journalists noted that the clip had transcended its original context. Political commentators referenced it in debates about youth culture and civics. Educators used it to spark conversation about responsibility and integrity. Even celebrities weighed in, praising the judge's composure and insight, elevating the moment into a cultural milestone. Yet beyond the metrics and hashtags, beyond the retweets and news cycles, there was an unmistakable sense that something had shifted. The courtroom had produced a viral lesson not in entertainment alone, but in values, a reminder that calm authority, patience, and moral clarity can resonate more powerfully than outrage or spectacle. And when the noise finally faded, one truth remained. When the courtroom emptied and the cameras were turned off, the lesson lingered. Judge Caprio's words had not been loud, but they were profound. In that quiet authority, a truth became clear. Justice is not about asserting dominance, about proving who is stronger or louder. True justice is measured in dignity, in the respect afforded to every person who enters the room, no matter their attitude, their background, or their mistakes. Rules, he reminded everyone silently with every measured pause and glance, are not cages. They are agreements, fragile yet necessary, that allow communities to function. They protect people who cannot protect themselves. They guide those who seek direction but are unsure where to turn. They provide a framework in which freedom is meaningful, because without boundaries, freedom is meaningless. Authority is not a weapon to wield over others. It is service, a responsibility to hold people accountable while also giving them the chance to learn, to grow, to reclaim dignity. Judge Caprio's calm, deliberate approach reframed power itself not as something to display or perform, but as a tool to uplift, to teach, to create understanding. That is why his courtroom resonates far beyond any single case. For the teen, the lesson was immediate, uncomfortable, unavoidable. For the audience, it was reflective, almost meditative. Many thought about their own moments of defiance or impatience, the times they had sought to assert themselves at the expense of others, and what they might have learned if someone had met them with calm clarity instead of anger. The moment asked viewers to consider, how do we treat the rules that guide us? How do we wield authority when we have it? How do we measure strength in ourselves and in others? And in that reflection, the story became more than entertainment. It became inspiration. A reminder that courage is not loud, that confidence is not performative, and that humility paired with principle carries more weight than arrogance ever could. When dignity meets defiance, patience and wisdom hold the power to transform, to teach, and to endure. In the stillness that followed, the message was clear. Greatness is not in overpowering others. It is in standing firm, listening, in choosing to lead with justice, compassion, and integrity. The day began with a simple courtroom moment, a teen declaring, "I don't follow rules," and it could have ended as just another story lost in the shuffle. But it didn't. Judge Caprio never raised his voice, never let anger dictate his response, and yet he won something far greater than any argument. He won understanding, respect, and a lesson that the world needed to see. Now it's your turn to carry that lesson forward. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who could benefit from seeing patience and dignity triumph over arrogance and defiance. Let it spark conversations, debates, reflections about the choices we make, the rules we follow, and the values we uphold in our own lives. Think about your own moments of frustration or rebellion. How might calm, steady leadership change the outcome? How might patience and principle transform conflict into clarity, tension into understanding? Reflect on accountability not just as punishment, but as a way to uphold community, fairness, and integrity. Join a movement that values dignity over noise, respect over spectacle, and wisdom over impulsive pride. Be part of a conversation that transcends clicks and views, one that emphasizes moral clarity and emotional intelligence. Every share, every comment, every discussion is part of a ripple that reinforces the idea that quiet authority can move hearts and minds. Even in a world that rewards volume, if you believe in justice that teaches rather than shouts, an authority that guides rather than intimidates, in lessons that resonate beyond a single courtroom, take action. Subscribe, share, and engage. Carry the story forward, and let it remind others that true strength is measured not in who speaks the loudest, but in who stands firm with integrity, because in the end, the lesson of that day is simple: calm, wisdom, and dignity are more powerful than defiance, and they are a standard we can all live by.